Yes. Very first thing I would like to do is make a general comment about, whoops, here's Joho and Mark again, is make a general comment about a number of comments that I have received from both groups over the course of the last few weeks. And have individually, none of them was important enough to respond to directly, but enough of these comments have built up that I think it necessary for me to address them. And so I'm making a standard little tree diagram here. Okay. This tree diagram represents the various possibilities. Ooh, it's invisible. Ooh, wow,
nice
that's
trick.
Neat. Okay, let's change the thing so we don't get the background.
Oh, it appears if you hold it in front of your person like that. Oh, or not.
It's an invisibulator. Okay, yeah, virtual background, none. There we go. That ought to solve that problem.
Now we can see the puppy.
Okay, so here, this tree represents a possible taxonomy for how games could have developed. That is, there are a million possibilities. However, the games industry did not follow that. The games industry has done something rather like this. That is, it went down a few paths and has very little diversity. It's a very narrow system of design. There are all sorts of assumptions that are unnecessary. Over the years, I've come up with all sorts of really weird ideas for games, and there's simply no reason for the industry to be so self-limited. The problem is that tradition insinuates itself into your mind, and you start thinking only in terms of what is traditional. It's really hard to break out of that mental rut. And I've noticed that a number of comments have, oops, Lorenzo won't send, sorry. A number of comments over the last few weeks from people with ideas and suggestions and so forth that are entirely too restricted to the orthodox formats of game design. And so I want you to really push hard on this concept of, break out of the box. Sorry, Kat, I'm busy. You really have to let go of a lot of very standard ideas that you just take for granted. You really have to question what you take for granted and ask, why must it be that way? Now, of course, the counter argument to this is intellectual anarchy. Okay, fine. Why not have a game where I stand on my head and sing blah, 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 blah. And yeah, obviously that's a bad idea. The way to do this, the way to break out of that box, is to go back to absolute fundamentals. This is the thing I learned in physics. The professor, I had a great professor who once said, always ask yourself, what is the essence of the problem? And that's what you have to be asking yourself. What is the essence of a game? And, you know, what is involved? And I haven't talked a lot about this theory issue. Basically, a game is about conflict and challenge. Those are the two fundamental things you have to have in any game. For a long time, every now and then somebody comes in and says, ooh, let's do a cooperative game where everybody's nice to each other and we all help each other and we all win. That doesn't work. There have been many attempts. It doesn't work because games require conflict, just like stories require conflict. A story without conflict is just not a story. I've told you the itsy bitsy spider thing, haven't I? With the itsy bitsy spider, that has conflict. 4 sentences long. There's conflict between the spider and the rain. The rain washes the spider out, but the sun comes out and dries out all the rain and the spider prevails. So there's conflict is intrinsic here, and you got to have conflict in a game, and that involves challenge. Somehow the player has to be challenged, and it's a cognitive challenge. Now, in athletic games, it's a physical challenge, but with computer games, you know, can you bend the keyboard with your bare hands? You know, no, we don't do that. Instead, it's a cognitive challenge, and so you have to ask about human cognition. What are the various styles of human cognition? And here you have to learn some basic, well, actually some evolutionary psychology. I know I've already talked about this to some extent, but have I told you about mental modules? Spatial reasoning. Okay, let me tell you about that.
Has it baked down? Cool. Has the chocolatey taste? Yeah. Cool.
Have I shown you the knife thing? No.
I don't think so, no.
Okay, now where's the knife? Okay, maybe it's over here. The human mind is not a general purpose computer. Remember, human mind evolved, just like, there it is, just like everything else in our bodies. You know, our fingers evolved for certain reasons. That, I mean, it wasn't just accidental. One day somebody was born with 5 fingers instead of 4 fingers, and so they just happened to, you know, we're all descended from them. No, every single aspect of your body, from the hairs, the precise shape of the ears, everything about you was determined by evolutionary challenges, various evolutionary problems. Everything evolved as a response to environmental challenges. And, you know, this finger isn't as long as that finger for a reason. It has to do with the way the hand grabs. If this finger were longer than that, let's imagine 1,000,000 years ago, here's some pre-human with this finger being longer than this finger. Well, when he grabbed at the fruit, he might not get it as well as somebody like you or I, who's, notice how the fingers line up as you grab them. It works better that way. And it's the same thing with everything about us. And it also works in the negative sense. For example, let's talk about kidney failure. Under certain circumstances, you can get a disease, your kidney isn't good enough, your kidney fails, you die. Well, what if we had 3 kidneys? Or no, just 2 bigger kidneys. Well, bigger kidneys would be stronger and could resist disease better, right? Yes, but bigger kidneys also need more calories, more blood flow, more of everything. And that means that a person who's born with bigger kidneys has to eat more food just to keep the kidneys going. And because they need more food, they starve to death more easily. So the kidneys are the size they are because if they were any bigger, they would cost too much. And if they were any smaller, they wouldn't be strong enough. You know, it's a careful balance. I'll even mention one other aspect of this. Theoretically, half of the, in terms of disease, half of the people who die from disease die from their own immune system. And that is, in fact, the optimum. That is, imagine an immune system that's really weak. So we imagine some tribe of people are born with immune systems that are weak. Well, then diseases come and kill a lot of the people. Okay, now let's imagine another tribe where the immune systems are really, really strong. What happens? Well, when a disease comes, they defeat it. Ha ha. But if they breathe, say, grass pollen, they get asthma from it. And it kills them because the immune system can overreact. And in fact, these are called autoimmune diseases, and there are a whole bunch of them, and a lot of people die from them. And in a perfect, if we were perfectly attuned to our environment, about half the time we'd die from our autoimmune response, and the other half we'd die from the disease. That's the perfect balance. Anyway. Now we can talk about the brain. The brain did not evolve, you know, as a general purpose computer that just, you know, it wasn't like we were born with you know, the latest, greatest CPU and we simply added more memory and made the clock run faster. That's not how the brain evolved. The brain evolved from something very simple, meant to deal with very simple problems, to something that had to deal with different problems. And there were many different ones. For example, a major step in human evolution came when the primates climbed up into the trees. You see, actually, the starting point for this was trees developing flowers, and actually all plants develop flowers, which attracted bees and other insects, which pollinated them, which was very useful. And to further attract, and then they came up with the other idea of seeds, and they surrounded the seeds with lots of nice, tasty, sweet fruit stuff. And the idea is animals would come and eat the fruit, and they'd get the seeds inside their tummies, and then they'd go a mile away and shit out the seed. And so the plant is growing a mile away. Plants don't have feet, they can't travel, but this way the animals carry the seeds for them. That was a great idea. But then they started putting their fruit up high in the trees, and the fruit had to drop down to the ground. And then a group of mammals decided, I'm going after that fruit. And they started climbing up in the trees to get the fruit, to eat it. And that had the additional advantage that they were completely safe from predators. Predators can't get you when you're up in the tree. Great way to live, right? Problem. If you're in the tree, you got to move from tree to tree, and that requires you to jump from branch to branch. And if your eyes aren't that good, you fall to the ground. Well, most animals have eyes on the sides of their head so they can look out both ways at once and see a predator coming from any direction. But the primates, the eyes move towards the front of the face so they can look forward and do triangulation to figure out the distance to something, like the branch you're going to jump to. And so primates developed binocular vision with triangulation, and so they could jump from branch to branch. Hooray for us. But to do that even better, they needed much more sophisticated visual processing. And to do that, they needed to grow a new part of the brain. And that's what they did. It's called the visual cortex. And it's at the back of the brain, and it does an enormous amount of processing. Then the primates had to get even better because they found that if you eat the fruit while it's still green, it's not very tasty. You got to wait for the sugars to develop. So you got to wait till it's ripe, which typically will mean it'll be red. So you got to be able to tell the difference between red and green. And most mammals don't have color vision, and so they can't do that. And so no good. But primates developed color vision so they could tell when the fruit was ripe. But again, that requires even more brain matter in the visual cortex. And then they needed to resolve the shape of things. That's another thing we can do. We can look at something and say, oh, look, you can tell what shape this thing is just by looking at it from the, go ahead, Lorenzo.
Where are you going with this? I'm having trouble I wasn't there in the first minutes of the meeting, so I don't understand why you're doing all the evolutionary.
Okay, I'll
I'm a
get
bit
there.
lost.
I like to tell these long stories that seem
Yeah.
utterly pointless until the very end when suddenly, wow, you understand something really important. You
Yeah.
understand something that nobody else in the game industry understands. Okay, so they developed the ability to recognize shapes. They developed big, complicated visual cortex, and we developed all sorts of other special capabilities, each one dedicated to a particular task. So the human brain is not like a general purpose computer. It's like one of these knives that has all of these different tools built into it. Oh well. Anyway, lots of different tools in one. Your brain is the same way. It has specialized elements for different tasks. What are those specialized elements? Well, the first is visual processing, which for our purposes expresses itself in its highest form, which is spatial reasoning. The ability to figure out, to navigate your way through terrain. And by the way, there's something called gender specialization here. That is, I will not explain why, but throughout human evolution, men needed better spatial reasoning powers than women did. It's a long story I won't go into right now, but basically the ability to imagine where you are on a map, to see the map from above and say, well, there's that hill there, and there are a whole bunch of trees, and there might be a lion in there, but if we go around through that way there and then climb up, we can get past the lions. And that kind of reasoning. That's spatial reasoning. Men are very good at it. Guess why 99% of all games have a map in them, because that requires spatial reasoning. Guess why men play games? Or do games require spatial reasoning because only men play them? Or do men play games because they have spatial reasoning in them? It's a feedback loop. Anyway, other mental, so spatial reasoning, linguistic reasoning, understanding language, but that also goes into ideas like deduction. If you are on a mountaintop during a thunderstorm, you might get hit by lightning. That comes under verbal reasoning. Let's see, something one scientist calls natural history reasoning, which is basically just a big encyclopedia of how the world works. If an animal has big teeth, it's probably dangerous. If an animal is eating grass, it's probably not dangerous. If something is glowing red, it's probably hot and will burn you. So this huge encyclopedia of stuff you know. And then a fourth module. This is the important one to understand. Social reasoning. The ability to understand other people's thoughts, feelings, and motivations. And for complicated reasons I will not go into right now, females are better at it than males. And that right there tells you an enormous amount about games, because 99% of all games have spatial reasoning in them, which males are specialized for, and no games have social reasoning in them, which females are specialized for. Can you guess why games are only for males? Or why everybody here is male? Anyway, the The point of this, I finally bring it around to the point. If you want to break out of the rut, you've got to think in terms of mental modules, and you do not want to do anything with spatial reasoning because that has been done to death. You know, spatial reasoning is right down here. Everybody does it. You're not going to win fighting that battle. Verbal reasoning, logical consequences, and so forth, that is somewhat handled. Although, by the way, here's an idea for a game I came up with more than 30 years ago. How about the game was called Lies, and basically it's a spy game where it's kind of like a mystery, only in this case you're collecting information to try to figure out who's the mole in your spy organization, and you do it based on people telling you things that are true or maybe false and figuring out what the truth or falsehood is, and then logically deducing who the mole is. Simple, obvious idea. There have been a few games that have sort of come close, but nobody's ever really fully, exploited that to the fullest. But the big one is social reasoning. That's the area that games have never touched. There are no games with any significant amount of social reasoning in them. That's what I've been working at for 25 years, going on 30 now. And I failed at it, but I've made a hell of a lot of progress. And that's what storytelling is about. Storytelling is about people, not things. And it is about relationships and how people change. And if you want to do interactive storytelling, you're going to have to focus on social reasoning, on how people think and feel. That's why we're doing all this crap with personality models and algorithms for change and so forth. That's the whole point of this. So social reasoning is the big deal. And by the way, first person who gets it who actually comes out with a really good social reasoning game, first is going to get a hell of a lot of females interested. There's actually a trade-off here. You come up with a good social reasoning game and every gamer in the world will say, because where's the spatial reasoning? I don't get to shoot anything. And so they're going to hate it. But eventually the women will, the word will get out and women will realize, hey, this really is a great game. And you'll certainly make a lot of money. And what the hell, you could be the digital version of the rock star with millions of women wanting to jump into bed with him. So if the money doesn't appeal to you, maybe the sex will. Anyway. Okay, let me respond to some questions here. I had a question along those lines. What's the role of the line of co-authorship between the player and game developer? It is that really the best way to think of it is to bring a little theology into it. How many of you have read Summa Theologica by San Tommaso Aquino? Nobody, of course not. It's really boring, really bad. You don't want to read it. But if you studied theology, turns out they have already solved this problem for us. You see, their issue was God and sinner. Do we have free will? That is, if here I am, a human being, and I decide to murder somebody. Well, don't blame me. God made me. I'm his creation. God made me do it. Well, yeah, that makes sense, but it just doesn't seem right, does it? Okay, I have free will. If I murder someone, it's my fault. Blame me. But wait a minute. How can I do that if God made me, then I did it on free will, then God is not omnipotent. God is up here in heaven controlling things and saying, wow, look at that. Chris murdered somebody. I never thought that would happen. well, wait a minute, God's supposed to be omniscient, omnipowerful. How can this happen? So this is the big battle they've been fighting for more than 1,000 years now. Actually, first goes back, I think Augustine wrote about it. Anyway, how do you resolve the problem? Well, there are actually two solutions. One solution is the omnipotent God who controls the entire universe. And so here's God in heaven saying, okay, raindrop, move another millimeter down. Bird, sing another note in your song. Volcano, shoot another little rock out. Joe, time for you to have lunch. He's just bouncing around. He's very fast multiprocessor, controlling everything in the universe. Well, that's the way some people look at God that way. And yes, that God says, okay, shoot that guy there, whatever. But the solution that most people have come to is the clockmaker God. God created the universe, only he didn't actually create any of the details. He created the laws of physics. He simply said, here's the universe, let there be physics, and then he stepped back to see what would happen. And planets formed, and life evolved, and humans evolved, and society evolved, and Joe murdered Fred. And it all just came out of the wash. It was the result of the rules of physics. That's now, how does this translate to games? Well, does a player have free will? Does a player have agency? In a story, the storyteller is God. The storyteller says, this happened, then that happened, then that, and that, and that, and that. The storyteller controls it. He's the omnipotent God. But in a game, you gotta have choice. You gotta have free will. The player, if he doesn't get to make the choices, doesn't have fun. So he's gotta have free will. And the only way for that to happen is for the God to be a clockmaker. The game designer is a clockmaker. The game designer creates the laws of physics for the game. How much ammo a gun can hold, how heavy it is, how many monsters there are, all of that stuff. The creator is a God of his own little toy universe. Same thing applies in a story world. The player, the creator of the story world establishes the dramatic laws of physics, and then the player enters that little story world and operates within those laws, but still has free will and still is able to make choice within the dramatic laws. So that's how we resolve that question. What are the basic brain module pattern of a story? Are epics activating more of these modules or the same module in a more complete way? Most stories are almost entirely about social interaction, about interpersonal relationships. Best example of this is the fact that most of our great stories do not have maps. I mean, think about the Star Trek universe. We've got detailed engineering diagrams of every type of spaceship in the Federation fleet, and a lot of Klingon and Romulan ships. We've got specifications on every race they've met, what they look like, whether their hair is green, all of it. We have enormous numbers of details, and we don't have a map. There's no map of the Star Trek universe. The Star Wars universe for many years had no map, and then later on somebody came up with a map, but it's pretty vague. In other words, Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones both had maps, but well, I'll leave those out. Those are more, well, I won't get into that. But basically, stories don't need maps because actors in stories don't really travel. They simply say, I'm going here, and the next thing you know, they're there. Now, of course, there are stories that are journeys, but the journeys are really a way of bringing new interaction, new experiences into it. Spatial reasoning, stories have absolutely no need for spatial reasoning. Stories are almost entirely about social reasoning. They're about how people interact with each other. And that's what that is the essence of story. So if you're going to do interactive storytelling, you got to learn a lot about social interaction. Let's see, from Mark, what's the difference between social reasoning and logical reasoning in the context of games? Logical reasoning is about deductions, logical deductions using the laws of logic. Social reasoning is is not deductive. You cannot prove how someone will react, but you should be able to. That is, I'll give you an example. When I was younger, I was totally clueless, and in fact, if you were ever able to eavesdrop on a bunch of young women talking about men, they're going to say, guys are clueless. They just don't get it, because young men really don't have any social reasoning. I was very much that way when I was younger. Example, once I was in a car, this was high school, I was in a car with some friends of mine, and I was sewing on a little hat I was making. And here we are in the car, and I'm taking the thing like that. I've got a needle in my hand. There's a girl sitting right next to me, and the needle is going right in front of her face. Whoops. Golly gee. It never occurred to me that that might make her uncomfortable to see this needle right in front of her face. And so she finally complained, and only then did I realize, oh, gee, that wasn't very nice of me, was it? Very common experience with men. So
Chris,
yeah, go ahead, Liz.
I have to interrupt on this. So about, I have some data on what kind of woman actually plays.
Yeah.
There already have been some studies.
Yeah.
And it's been a while that people and production company make studies to try to appeal to female audience. It's been, I don't know, it's been 10 years, 15 years, I don't know. So if you look at the image I sent you, gender percentages, what kind of genre the female plays. So we have match 3 kind of games, family farm sims, casual puzzles. So match 3 is like Candy Crush. Candy Crush is played by 70% of women. Candy Crush is not about social interaction. It's about it's about spatial.
Yep.
But I think Chris was saying there's no current game which is hitting this social interaction niche. Such a game doesn't exist
Family
yet.
and farm sim is kind of a social, like The Sims, Farmville, Gestion. You know, where
Stardew Valley.
Stardew Valley. And Japanese and Western RPGs are played, 30% is women, 70% is men. Atmospheric exploration, 40% of female. And casual puzzle is 40%. We see a trend that women seem to like strategic games and logical games. And interactive drama is on 5th position, 37%. But I mean, interactive drama is kind of the kind of game we make. We talk about here, interactive storytelling. It's not like interactive drama, but it kind of fits in this kind of genre, I think. So we already know that if you want to target specific audiences, we already have data on this. So I think if we make decisions on what kind of game we make, we should base our views or our strategy based on data and not on feelings or intuition or what we think is good.
Or
because
education.
yeah, I mean it's it's really used now in mobile games. They use data on very specific analytics where you can have the genre, but not only this, what kind of political views do you have? What kind of class, social class are you in? How much money do you have? What is your age group? Precise data, and they make games based on people's reaction to advertisements and gameplay time. Like Steam is doing this.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you here. Here's some counter arguments. One, imagine a world in which there was no chocolate, and I came forward saying, you know, if you made chocolate, people would really like it. And you could come back with an enormous amount of marketing data saying, nobody buys chocolate. I mean, the evidence clearly shows that millions of people are buying broccoli. Obviously, broccoli is better than chocolate. Here's another way of thinking about it. My point here is that we aren't offering them social games, so how do we know what the preference is? Another way of thinking about it is where they do get a choice. For example, cinema. Now, in the cinema, we know a great deal about female preferences. In fact, there's an absolute rule here that the men like action. They want to see, you know, people fighting and shooting and punching and kicking and so forth. And the women like romantic comedies. And if you're really going to do a good job, you somehow combine them, where, you know, the guys are every now and then shooting and kicking and punching, and then they have romance with the girls and so forth. There are a number of movies that have done this well. One of the best, as I recall from a long time ago, was Pearl Harbor. Titanic was primarily romantic, but it did have all that spectacle of the thing sinking. The comic book game or comic book movies, they're kind of weak on the social interaction part. They've been trying to bring that up. If you look at the evolution of the comic book movies, starting with Batman and Superman and then moving up to the latest ones, you'll see steady increases in the amount of social interaction going on, but they're still primarily male audiences. So if you look at cinema where there is a choice, what you see very clearly is that the women are going for the social reasoning stuff and the men for the, you know, the violence and the spatial reasoning. On the case of, literature. If you talk about, you know, cheap novels, you know, the whatever, literature for entertainment that people buy just for fun. The women buy the romances. I mean, this is just absolute truth that's been developed. I mean, this 50 years they've known this. There's a class called the Gothic romance, which is strictly for women. The men aren't very big in that, in the novels. That is, men don't buy as much of literature as women. But anyway, so the third point I will make, here we go, motorcycles. How many women do you think are really into motorcycles, you know, tearing the engine down, putting in new piston rings, rebuilding it, getting all greasy, driving that motorcycle down the road? Well, not many. Motorcycles are primarily for men. But if you actually go out on a Sunday afternoon and watch people on motorcycles, you'll see a lot of women on the back of the motorcycle. Why? Is it because they like motorcycles? No, it's because it is something social they can do with their boyfriend or husband who does like motorcycles. Same thing with guns. Not that many women are interested in guns, but you will see lots and lots of women doing gun stuff with their boyfriend, husband, whatever. There are lots and lots of cases like this where women participate in what is essentially what is more a male activity, and they do so for social reasons. So there are a lot of reasons for this. And yes, there are women who play games, but in terms of money spent, if you actually look at where the dollars are coming from, most of it is being spent by males. And in fact, if you look at the various surveys and polls and so forth, you'll find that the women tend towards the free solitaire games, card games, Candy Crush, that type of thing. Or they'll go with certain types of social games like Words with Friends. They will RPGs, obviously. But again, they're looking, if you look at their actual activity in those things, it's more social than, well, anyway. So the fundamental fact is that we are, oh, and one other point about all the polls. There is a political agenda behind many of the polls, which is to establish that games aren't cheap, trashy, and entertaining.
A poll is not scientific. A poll doesn't work. So I saw some studies on game and statistics and analytics of what kind of statistics you can have. So, for example, the commentaries on the Play Store from Google's Play Store, the feedback is what people say. It's what they think they like or think they do. It's not what they do. It's attitudinal versus behavioral.
Very
so we should look at behavioral, like, and this is the stuff you don't see in the commentary. Commentary you could ignore and wouldn't change a lot. Sometimes you have a very big vocal people on the internet saying, oh, this game is bad, but there's no real influence on how many people is buying the game, or what kind of, like, you don't see real boycott on video games in the video games industry. People say things, they say what they think, but what they think is not according to what they do. Like they will say, this company is pushing a political agenda, so I will not buy their games. And you look at the data, and it's the most bought game of the year. You know?
Yeah, they still buy the game.
Yeah, I mean, the most recent one is very popular, called The Last of Us 2. Huge backlash online, lots of publication, huge scandal, and it's the best-selling game of the year and best-selling game in his category. It's a huge success. And
we're running out of time here, so I need to get us to the main topic I wanted to discuss today. This digression turned out to dominate the whole hour. Encounter Editor, you've all had a chance to play with it now and get a feeling for it. Obviously, it needs a lot of work, but the question is whether I should make that effort. And so I'm going to ask your vote, or I'm going to ask you a poll here for 3 scenarios. First scenario, and my question for you is, would you actually use the Encounter Editor to build a story world under these conditions? Scenario 1, the existing Encounter Editor that you saw with obvious cleanup stuff, getting rid of the excluding people as antagonists, improving the testing facility, getting a runtime engine, with the idea being that this would be something on the web that people could play. And so you create a story world, but it's pretty much nothing more than a cleaned up, corrected version of the existing encounter editor. Second level, pretty serious improvements. You know, we add some features to it. Everybody says, you know, we really need to have this feature because without it, you know, it's just too difficult. So we throw in some extra features. And then actually the third scenario is I'm sorry, this is not the kind of thing I want to do. So here's the question I put to you. First, how many of you, and I'll ask you to just type your answer into the chat, how many of you do not feel that the encounter editor, even with improvements, would represent the kind of thing that you want to commit yourself to building a story world with? You want to go in a different direction. So if you want to, you know, just type in a chat message, no, I wouldn't do it, please do so now. Okay, if you would do it, if you would actually build a story world, if it had a few more important features that you think are necessary to its being useful, then please type in. I'd use it with a few major additional features. And then finally, if you'd be willing to use it if it were just in the current state, but cleaned up and made operational and bugs fixed and all of that, but pretty much the same feature set, then please, I would use it if it ran with the same feature set. Let's see. Hard to evaluate without having a play button to try something out. Yep. Option 2, I think would best be used as an educational tool to teach these concepts. However, what it's lacking now is knowledge on how to actually use it as you intend. So, Mark, are you suggesting that it really needs a demo?
What it needs not so much as a demo, but a tutorial on how to use it. Because when you open up the program, what you see is something that's already built into the system. And from what I understand, you're supposed to go into the XML and change stuff around. And I wasn't able to intuitively tell that that's how you're supposed to create the actual story world. So really, I don't really think it needs any new features. The bare bones of what is there is really great and important. And if it were more clear on how to play around with these tools, I think people would be very interested in playing around with them. Yeah.
I was going to say on that, potentially getting some like sufficient video documentation, just to kind of, you know, when you open the tool, you know, it offers you like a, you know, some tutorials on like, you know, using the fundamentals, and yeah, I think that would be a good shout.
Yeah, the tutorial itself could be even, it could be in any format. It could be a video, it could even be a PDF just explaining what to do. If the more accessible it is, the more people can handle onto it. But even if it's just something that's very, very simple and not the most accessible, something there that just explains how to use it, I think will make it accessible enough to the people who really want to get into it will be able to use the tool, I think, in some capacity. Because right now
Agreed.
it's, yeah.
I worry that
go ahead.
bar curve personality model, which forces like the bounded numbers, which force the blending function, like make the whole thing very, very complex. You know, there's a lot of like moving parts in that little stream of causality. And I don't know, I was thinking about that a lot this week, the bounded numbers and the blending, and if I were to like teach a friend who knows nothing about video games or storytelling to write a story, I would be next to him on the computer for a long time to work the program.
I suppose then what you would do is just explain in the tutorial why that process is important to this structure. Because it is, I mean, it's the foundation of how this encounter editor works, is the blend system and how the numbers are transformed. Chris, your videos do a good job of explaining that. The only thing that's really missing is just an understanding of how to use the program itself.
If I can chip in, after testing the encounter editor, I've came to the conclusion similar to George's, but a bit more advanced. So what Mark was saying is right, but I don't think that the direction would be the most optimal. And my proposition is to make the software more self-revealing. A bit similar to what I've done in my prototype, allow for the player to the creator to play with all the settings in the editor and to test it, to have a very short iteration loop. So like
the play.
Like the modern engines where you can set something up, press the play button and see the changes, or even like the most advanced engines currently and the ones that blend the gameplay with the creation, where you can change things during play. So you can have an immediate effect and learn that way. So in a way, the software teaches the creator how it works by allowing the creator to change things, see what is the effect, and learn by basically doing, like games do.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The more you can expose the inner workings of the system and make that clear, the more successful it will be as a tool.
Well,
yeah, and you speak also, Chris, on your site. You explain about the difference between Windows and Mac. And on Windows, you have a lot of features, but you don't know how it works. And so you applied your ideas on the software, but maybe it's too. I don't know, it's all the features are accessible. Like you add something, you click on plus, you want to delete something, you click on negative, and it's simple, but some of the stuff needs a bit more explanation, like simple stuff like, for example, I'm going to talk about the software I use for games in Unity. There's a lot of stuff, it's a bit Windows, but if you fly around the some things that you don't understand, there's a small window that says, so this does blah, 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 blah. And so this text is here if you want to learn about it. It's like comments.
Adding tooltips.
Yeah, tooltips. Yeah. And yeah, I think I agree with George on the play button and what did Cornell said also. It's like it's good to see the effects of what you're doing in the software directly. So we have to think as, like in games, when we think about the player, in the software, we should think about the user of the software. So the game creator should have this nice experience when he's using the software. But this is kind of hard. Like my question is, the three options for me depends of how many time we have and really realistically how many people can work on this project. Because if it's I don't know, it's like if you want to make a big software, you need like a big team and it's complicated. So I don't know, for example, myself, I couldn't I'm not experienced enough to, and I don't know XML or Java, so I couldn't make the software better. But maybe collectively we could do like some live coding session where we think and we code some, like for example, you could be doing some editing in the software and we could comment directly and say, oh, maybe we could do this or we could do that. Maybe this way it could be faster, but I'm thinking about if we want to cram a lot of features in the software, it's going to take so many hours, days, weeks.
Yeah, that
So
raises a very important point. I think we can all agree that if magic happened and I got $10 million of development money for this project and I could hire a ton of people, man, we could build this. This would be fabulous. I think we can all agree on that. But we don't have $10 million. What we've got is one old programmer who's starting to have problems writing code and has a million other projects underway. And so really the question is, do you think I can pull this off working, 10, 20 hours a week on this? Is that going to be enough, or do we need more than that to actually produce something worthwhile?
No, I think we need more. I think, so I just, I mean, I can't let people talk. I talk too much, but what I mean is we need a lot of people. Maybe like you did a Kickstarter for Seaboots and didn't ended up working, but maybe we could, a way could be to do like, hey, I want to make this software to make games. We are a team and we need, let's say, I don't know, there is this site like Patreon. People say they give you $10 per month, and you can give them a version, a beta or alpha version of the software, and they can see the improvements and maybe they can play a game. So there's two things. We could ask, I think we could ask a bit of money if we really want to do it. But if we want to sell the idea of this game software, this game maker software, we should have a good game that works made with this software, because it's hard to say this is going to be amazing, but I have nothing to, like, it's hard to, if I can't play the game, I can't trust the...
A flagship title, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is, what will really make this work is for me to finish the Arthurian story world, Le Morte d'Arthur. And that's going to take a while. I'm still writing text for it. But I also need to clean up the encounter editor and make it, do some simple programming to make it easier to use. So I will pursue both of those, but the conclusion I get here is that until we have Le Morte d'Arthur ready to go, or if I make a very simple short demo, which...
What about, just Act 1, or even the opening of Act 1?
Yeah.
Something to get the beak wet.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think there's still like a flash of insight or something required to make a player come out of, or like a ton of encounters. To have a player come out of the encounter system and go, wow, that story was just for me, Like, that was really my story I told. Would be a ton of writing work to get that feeling out of the person.
That's what I've been doing, a ton of writing work. I mean, there is I measured it's basically the amount of text I've already built is too big to be treated as a novel. That is, in terms of the number of characters, it's...
Do you have the word count offhand? I'm just curious.
Not directly, because the text is embedded in a lot of XML, but I'm guessing that we're talking about well, I know that the raw code is, or the data file is 1.5 megabytes of text, and but a lot of that is embedded. I'm guessing we're talking something between 500 and 1,000 kilobytes of text.
A lot of text.
So we're talking 100,000 to 200,000 words. So that's a
I think if
wild
memory
guess.
serves, it's about half of the Tolkien series.
Yeah.
That could be wrong.
Well, it's big.
Damn.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I'm
maybe
still, I'm maybe 3/4 of the way through the text I need. So
I like George's idea. We make a prototype. We take one scene that is already finished and we try to make a small game out of it. We put your ideas of game mechanics, of interactions, social interactions, repercussion, time, and we make like I don't know, 10 minutes dialogue sequence where you can have a lot of different interactions, and we show it to the people quickly, and we get the feedback. And with the feedback, we will see if it's worth the effort to do this huge project, because we will have a lot of good feedback. And if people say, maybe they will say, I like the story, but I have a problem. I don't see, the text is too small. So we make the text bigger. Or maybe the sentences are written in a strange way. Or maybe when I click on the box doesn't work, you know? So we get feedback and we make small modification, and we make a prototype, and we make some priorities on what kind of work we have to do. And if we put this in small tasks, this way maybe we could help. Like we need to fix the box issue. We need to fix the dialogue system. When you answer question number 6, it doesn't work. So make a small assembly line of small tasks, you know, for a small...
Unfortunately, that won't work. And the
Yeah.
reason why might be explained as follows. Suppose you watched the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy movie, and only it stopped while Frodo was still well before, while he was still in the cave with the spider. You know, spider eats him, the end. Would that be a satisfying movie? Of course not. Imagine the very first Star Wars movie where it cuts off before Luke Skywalker blows up the Death Star. Would that work? No.
It's movie number 4.
Yeah, movie number 4, which however you count it.
I mean, there is a full movie before the Death Star blowing begins.
I have a counter example to that though, Chris, because this week I went back and watched 2 cartoons from my childhood that were both, I was like, there were no toys for this cartoon, but I still remember the cartoon like 30 years later. And I went back and they were both canceled mid-season. So these arcs, you know, I skimmed through some of the episodes. These arcs were all cut off when the show got canceled. And I think that's precisely why they stuck in my mind. Because there were these unresolved, you know...
Firefly, Samurai Jack, things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the best ones
Well,
are all cancelled.
My point here is that the way Le Morte d'Arthur is structured, you don't get to do anything interesting for the first quarter of the story world. And then you start getting to make some choices, but they appear to be random, scattered. There's certainly no crisis, no clear, there's not even an obvious antagonist. It builds up to this point where everything comes together. And so this is true of all stories. They have to lay a groundwork, build things up to a point, and then everything comes together. And so I don't think we can do a little version. It's kind of like the concept of critical mass. you can't have a nuclear firecracker. The smallest nuclear bomb still makes a very large boom.
Chris, I was going to say something real quick. Obviously, we've discussed like commercial funding. Have you pursued academic avenues? So things like approaching universities or sourcing, support or labor from students, or like have you considered like presenting this research to students?
I am not a salesman. I hate selling my work. I have never sold my work, really. I just do it and dump it on the world. I've been lucky in some cases, but I just don't like doing that kind of thing. I am thinking, though, that the encounter, I had thought that the Storytron technology would, attract a cadre of determined story builders, and I was wrong on that. I am now thinking that perhaps the encounter editor might do that. It's simple. It's a lot simpler than the Storytron technology.
Yeah, how is it different than the Storytron? And is it still doing like a history element? Like,
no, I mean,
right?
it
There's
is
no book.
immensely simpler than the Storytron technology. I mean, it just, difference is gigantic. So, so I'm thinking about that right now, but as yet, I don't know. I in many ways, I'm gathering data from you guys. And I'll be gathering from the other group as well. So we'll just have to see. My guess, though, is that the right way to do it will be, first, I've made a lot of mistakes in this course with you guys. And I now realize that I should have started off with the encounter editor as the target technology rather than Storytron. And I think I wasted a lot of your time with all the talk about the Storytron stuff. So I'm thinking about revising this course so that it is focused around the encounter editor. That at least gives the very basic concepts of using a personality model with algorithms to make decisions. I think that's the basic level. What I've found is that that's as hard as I can push people. With Storytron, I just went way over everybody's head. So.
Sorry, the reason I was going to ask was, I mean, I don't know whether it'd come to anything, but I'm happy, obviously, with me lecturing with Cambridge, one of the Cambridge universities. I can try and see if there's any kind of interest with the students, or talk to some of the other lecturers.
Yeah, maybe the thing to do is that fourth generation of the course, we would bring in some of those people. It would just be a matter of telling people. I'd have to be willing to take on more sections. Let me ask you this. I have thought of this as primarily interactive and therefore must be 10 or less students. Do you agree with that? Here we go. Two choices. One, I have a small number of sections with no more than 10 people per section. Let's say 3 sections, no more than 10 people. We're interactive, but we got 30 people total. Option B, big lecture thing, Zoom with 100 people, and I do all the talking and there's no interaction. But I reach a lot more people, which would ultimately accomplish more in terms of getting people to build story worlds.
You have a third idea.
I'm sorry?
I have a third idea. Like,
okay.
Instead of you make all the class, you teach us to teach the ideas you have. So we make a church.
Missionary.
All right, we'll be your
cult of
mission.
Crawford.
Got L. Ron Hubbard over there.
We'll create a religion.
What I mean is this way we could. The idea is if you give someone some fish, he will eat for a day. You teach him to fish, he will eat for life. So the idea is if we want to do it, we have to take some time. It's going to take many people. So I think it's going to have to sometime we will have to do some sailing. Yeah, the stuff you don't like to do, sells a project. Not maybe not money, but sells the idea. So people like it, people hear it. So I think it's not a bad idea to have, maybe if we talk about it, maybe some people will want to work for the project for free just to do some marketing. Evangelism. I mean, Unity, for example, is a software that is made. It's been 10 years. The software is not finished. It's 200 people, a lot of money, but the software doesn't work. It's a lot of bugs, but they have evangelists. I saw a conference of a guy, his job is an evangelist. He just says, Unity is amazing. You can do this, you can do movies, we can do HD graphics, blah, blah, blah. But it's riddled with bugs, and there's a lot of versions. Every week you have a new version. But at the beginning, it was one small software, and they build a community. It's a community that makes this thing. So I think we understood we need to make a lot of effort, a lot of time, to cram a lot of time to do it. I think doing the Arthurian legend, like writing a big book, takes many years. But doing a small prototype of another small story, maybe inspired by the Arthurian legend, can be done in 1 month. If you work full-time, 1 month, you can do a prototype. You can do a prototype in 2 weeks. But it's the prototype, which is the implementation of the idea, that will sell the idea, the big vision that you have.
Well, okay, I will think about the idea of a small demo. I need to take off now. However, I want to first, there is
a large mass, though. A large mass where people get in for free. That's how you sell a church, Chris. So that's my vote on that question.
Okay.
Before you leave.
That video is an hour long. It is a documentary that was done by a German team on the history of the Game Developers Conference. And I figure prominently in it as the founder and initial driving force behind it. If you have an hour to waste, it's actually, I was impressed by the quality of the guy's work. He really did a lot of research, and it is very distantly applicable to our considerations right now. That is, how do you get a bunch of people together sharing ideas? So anyway, you might want to watch it for fun. Otherwise, I will...
Before you sign off, Chris,
yeah.
I do want to say I am a part of the GDC summer thing now that's happening. I don't know if you've gotten any feedback on what that's like. I just thought I can give a quick anecdote to what that's been like so far. It's not the greatest, but they're trying really hard to make this online networking thing work. I think personally I've met a few people, but their most successful thing is where they put everyone in a chat room for 20 minutes and have 12 people saying, I do this, I do this, I do this, okay, bye. So I don't know. It's sort of like they're doing a very interesting experiment to try to make GDC happen offline that is mostly unsuccessful. And I thought I'd just let you know. Yeah.
Okay, then.
Yeah.
Cool.
You guys have given me some stuff to think about. I'll work on it and get back to you with some reactions to it, either by email or next week. Until then, have a good week.
Yeah.
Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.